Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. My name is Julia. My trail name is Perseverance Pays. I'll get into how I got my trail name in a future video. I wanted to introduce myself and talk about the direction I'm taking this channel. I developed a love for nature, the woods, and the mountains when I was a little girl. Some of my greatest childhood memories was spending summers in the Catskill Mountains with my grandfather. I also grew up on a farm in central New York, and we had acres of woods behind the house. My brothers and I would clear trails and areas to pitch our tents. We loved camping in the woods behind our house, and sometimes many of our friends would come with their tents too. Also, as a little girl, I'd spend hours in the woods pretending I was on some big hiking expedition. When I was in high school, I first heard about the Appalachian Trail and thought even then it would be so cool to someday hike it. But life happened. Marriage, 2 kids, divorce, college as a single parent, second marriage, and third kid. In October 2010, when my husband and I got married, we moved to South Central Pennsylvania, which put us right by the Appalachian Trail. So close that most places I drove, I would pass one of the trailheads. However, a month after we were married, I found out I was expecting my youngest son. Even though I had another child, my dream of thru hiking was still there. I talked about it with my husband many times during the time we were dating, during our engagement, and even after our son was born. However, it was still a little bit before I actually hiked on the trail because the Appalachian Trail isn't exactly designed for strollers. In 2015, I found out a friend of mine was thru hiking. She is also currently on the trail now doing another thru hike. This was extremely motivating for me. I will be speaking about her more in future videos because she plays a very important part of my journey. During that time, I thought about doing a 2020 thru hike, which was not very practical. My thought was my older boys would be out of high school and could help with their younger brother, but I finally came to my senses because I absolutely did not want to be away from my son for that long. I knew that the trail was always going to be there and that there was no rush. Besides, I need to lose some weight and get myself back into shape. Right now, my youngest will be graduating high school in 2029, so I'm planning to start my thru hike on March 4th, 2030, on my 53rd birthday. While my friend, whose trail name is Highlighter, was doing her first thru hike, I decided to do my first hike on the Appalachian Trail. On Saturday, May 2nd, 2015, I took my youngest, who was 3, packed a picnic lunch, and headed to Boiling Springs. We hiked south past Children's Lake and over Yellow Breeches Creek. I saw a sign that said Appalachian Trail Campground and followed it, thinking the trail went that way. It was less than a quarter mile to the camp, and I met some section hikers. They told me that the trail did not go that way, to go back to the sign and turn left. First day on the trail, and I'm already making wrong turns. If I had been paying attention to the blazes, that wouldn't have happened. We hiked through fields, this time with me paying attention to the blazes, and came to some woods. We hiked a little way in and found a log to sit on and had our lunch. Then we hiked back. Altogether, we may have hiked around 3. Not too bad considering I was going at a 3-year-old's pace. We spent some time at Children's Lake looking at the ducks and geese before heading home. It was a pleasant first hike on the AT. A week later, I decided to go back out again, still with my youngest son, but this time we headed north from Boiling Springs. We hiked about 2 miles to Route 74 and had lunch. After lunch, we went just a little ways more up the trail before heading back because a day hiker coming from that direction told us that there were horses just around the corner. A month later, all 3 of my boys participated with me in an event called Hike the AT in a Day. My sister-in-law sent me a link on Facebook about this event put on by Backpacker Magazine. For those who are unaware of this event, you sign up to hike a certain section with the hopes that there will be someone signed up for every section, so the whole trail gets hiked that day. I signed up for a section that was just over 6.5 miles, from Lehigh Road in Boiling Springs to Old Stonehouse Road in Carlisle. The hike was on June 20th, 2015. I was so excited to have all 3 of my boys with me. We had such a wonderful time. My youngest got tired and towards the end spent most of his time on his brother's backs. As soon as my husband picked us up, he was sound asleep in the back of the van. By July of that year, Highlighter and her tramley made it up to Pennsylvania. I was following her progress on Facebook. When she was close to West Virginia, I told her to send us a message when she was close to Boiling Springs and we would have her over for dinner. A few days before she got to Boiling Springs, she sent me a message and told me when she was expected to be there. I told her we would be more than happy to come pick her up and any companions that may be hiking with her and make them dinner, let them shower, and camp out for the night in our back field. 3 of her friends took us up on that offer: Mama D, Green Man, and Casanova. Mama D and Green Man were a mother and son from Tampa, Florida. Casanova was from Russia. We picked them up on July 20th, 2015, took them to the local supermarket so that they could resupply, and brought them back to our house. Glenn made dinner, and I was able to spend a lot of time talking with Highlighter and Mama D. We talked about different gear, things I thought I needed on the trail but don't, parts of the trail. They showed me their stoves, and I was able to ask them questions. It was nice to have women to talk to about personal questions that only other women would have. I learned more from talking to them than I did from any book or anything I read on the internet. They pitched their tents in our backyard, and we sat around a campfire for a little while and visited. The next morning, I made pancakes for everyone. After a good breakfast, we took them back to Boiling Springs. I was going to do some hiking with Highlighter that day too. We headed north from Boiling Springs. I hiked with her for about 8 miles. When she was in front, I did have a hard time keeping up, but eventually she let me lead, so I was able to walk at a more comfortable pace. She also let me use her trekking pole so I could see what it was like using them. We hiked to the US 11 footbridge, and from there we would walk to a diner. Highlighter treated me to lunch, and my husband came to pick me up. We gave her a ride back to the trailhead, gave our hugs, and said our goodbyes, and she was back on the trail. I was very tired, but glad I was able to hike with her that day. A month later, I decided to do my first overnight hike. My oldest son went with me. Keep in mind, we had no proper equipment and used my husband's old military equipment and whatever we could get our hands on. It was a disaster, but fun at the same time. We had the great idea of hiking 12.2 miles from Boiling Springs to the James Fry shelter. We quickly discovered that we bit off more than we could chew. The day before we left, we had thunderstorms all day, so even though it was a beautiful day, the ground was still wet. It wouldn't have been so bad if we were walking in the woods, but for the first mile to a mile and a half, we were walking in fields. Our feet got soaked, and we were wearing regular sneakers. We did see some beautiful spider webs and orb weaver spiders. The ground wasn't as wet in the woods, but the damage was already done. We were also dealing with the uncomfortable packs. My son's right arm kept going numb, and he had to keep readjusting the straps on his pack. We hiked up our first mountain. My son was ahead of me and told me to hurry up and look at this. Crawling across the path was a box turtle. Very cool. We made it up our first mountain, thank God. The downhill was so much easier, but that wasn't the last mountain we would have to climb. Just past Center Point Knob, we stopped for a snack. Up until this point, I didn't know there were so many camps between shelters. All the places I've hiked before didn't have the camps, and until this hike, I've never seen any of the AT shelters. The first shelter we came to was the Alec Kennedy shelter. We hiked up the trail to check it out. A little further down the trail, we found some rocks, and we sat there to eat our lunch. It was nice getting those packs off. While we were eating, a gentleman walked by and asked how we were doing. He said he worked for the conservatory and had a 10-mile section that he covered, making sure no one needed anything. I know now these people are called trail runners. We finished our lunch and got back on the trail, walking up to what I think was the worst hill so far. We passed Whiskey Spring, which is also the western terminus of the Mason-Dixon Trail. We should have gotten more water there, but I wasn't thinking about it at that time. Then the rocks started. We had to climb over, down, and through. It was fun, but it took us a while. While we were climbing, a turkey buzzard flew over my head and scared the life out of me and perched in a tree. By this time, we knew there was no way to get to the James Fry shelter before dark, and we were tired and sore. We found a camp at the top of the mountain, but we didn't have a lot of water, or so I thought. We had 3 liters, more than enough, but I was still learning. I thought the road we were coming to was PA 94, so we hiked down the mountain hoping to find water. The road was a lot further down the mountain than it looked. One thing I learned from this is that things on the AT are a lot further than they appear. We passed a section hiker and talked for a while. He was out for a 2-week hike. We told him that we were out for the night, and he told us we had too much stuff. He also told us that 94 was still well over a mile away. We were not going to hike back up the mountain, so we decided to keep going and hope to either come to a camp and make our water last or just push on to 94. When we finally reached a road, it wasn't 94, but a dirt road called Old Mountain Road. We hiked probably just over a 1/4 mile past the road and saw a side trail. It was a camp. The camp was just a clearing with a fire pit. There was a stream, and we were so excited to see water, but when we collected it, the water was a rust color. We purified it and thought we'd use it only in an emergency. We were beyond tired, and due to the fact that we weren't wearing proper hiking shoes, but sneakers, our feet were hurting. We realized we took on too much too soon. We decided to spend the night and ask my husband to pick us up on Old Mountain Road in the morning. We found a nice area by the stream away from where we were going to be cooking to set up our tents. After we set up our tents, we cooked dinner. I used sticks and Lincoln logged them around a steno burner. I absolutely do not recommend this. And we set water on to boil for our dinner. We had freeze-dried sweet and sour pork, Cheez-It crackers, and freeze-dried ice cream sandwiches. After dinner, we hung our bear bags with all our food in it on the other side of the camp, far away from our tents. The sun had not quite set when we climbed into our tents, but we were so tired. It was a broken sleep. I'd find a comfortable position, sleep an hour or 2, then wake up and find another comfortable position. We woke up about 9:30 in the morning. With my husband coming to get us, there was no need to get up early. My body was so stiff and sore that I was glad we weren't attempting the hike back. We got our bear bag down, and while we were waiting for the water to heat up for breakfast, we took our tents down. We had oatmeal, Pop-Tarts, and coffee. When we were done, we repacked our packs and hiked the 1/4 mile or so back to Old Mountain Road to wait for our ride. I was so happy to go home and soak in a hot tub. This first overnight didn't discourage me. It encouraged me to work harder. We had a blast. I loved every minute of it, as hard and painful as it was. My last hike that year was an amazing day hike in the Shenandoah National Park. Every year at our church, the youth group did a hike-a-thon for an organization called Speed the Light. They usually hike a 10 to 12 mile section on the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania, but this year they plan to hike the AT in Virginia. They would be staying at the youth pastor's parents' cabin the night before and hike in the Shenandoah National Park from Little Stony Man to Beams Gap, about 12.5 miles. I asked the youth pastor if I could come along, and he said they'd be happy to have me join them. The day before, it rained all day. It was raining that morning too, but by the time we got into the van, it had stopped. We climbed to the top of Little Stony Man, and the view was absolutely breathtaking, although foggy. Most of the views after that were just as beautiful. The start of the hike wasn't too bad. I was able to move fairly quickly. We stopped for lunch at the Pinnacle Picnic Ground. It felt good to sit down. There was a little more downhill after this, and then a lot of uphill. I fell behind with some of the uphill climbs. I had to keep reminding myself that most of the people I was hiking with were all teens or in their early 20s, so they were able to handle this much better than I could. We passed Bird's Nest No. 3 shelter during the hike, the second shelter I've seen on the AT. The last 2 or 3 miles was downhill. Now you would think this would make things easier. Wrong. It was very rocky, and it seemed harder going downhill, trying not to trip over the rocks. Most everyone is far ahead of me by now, but my oldest son and 2 other young men waited for me and walked the rest of the way with me. Everyone else finished about 40 minutes before we did. Once I came to the end, I was very thankful to see that the van had not yet arrived to get us. I didn't want everyone waiting on me. It came about 5 minutes after I had finished. I was exhausted, but so glad I did it. I was so proud of myself, and again, it didn't discourage me, only encouraged me to work harder. Over the years, I've done many successful section hikes and day hikes, including a 5-day, 4-night hike from the Scott Farm in Carlisle to Route 325 near Halifax. There were a few where I got off a little early because of blisters or extreme heat, but I learned something from each one. I will continue to do videos where I'll talk about my past hikes and show pictures. I'll discuss how I received my trail name in one of those videos. The purpose of this channel is to document my hikes in preparation for my through hike, talk about past experiences on the trail before I created this channel, and also do some educational videos about the Appalachian Trail. Then finally, to document my 2030 through hike of the Appalachian Trail. I hope you'll consider following me on this adventure. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching. Happy hiking, and I will see you on the trail.